Andrew Jackson's Native American policies were probably the landmark of his political career. Through the Indian Removal Act of 1830, Jackson managed to persuade the Native Americans to voluntarily migrate to the west of the Mississippi, allowing the United States to secure land that was crucial for the expansion and development of the growing country. In order to understand the Indian Removal Act, we must first understand why Jackson would be motivated to pass such a policy. Jackson's deep-seated resentment towards the natives can be traced back as early as the Revolutionary War. During the Revolution, the British allied with the majority of Native American tribes in an effort to quell the revolting Americans. With the help of the natives, the British forces pushed up into northern South Carolina, and at the age of 13, Jackson enlisted in the local militia with his two brothers. Andrew Jackson would be the only one to live to the end of the war. His mother, Elizabeth Jackson, had also passed away after contracting a fever while nursing relatives who had been captured on a British prison ship. The war had taken almost all of his immediate family from him, and Jackson directed his anger at the Native Americans. During his political career as member of Congress, this disdain for the natives was actively reflected in his arguments against treaties with the Native Americans, believing that the treaties answer no other purpose than opening an easy door for the Indians to pass through to butcher our citizens. Andrew Jackson's disregard for any potential civility within the Native American population would become one of the defining beliefs in his career as a politician. Jackson's views of the Native Americans would also be heavily affected after his service in the Creek War. The Creek War began when the Creek leader, Tecumseh, attempted to unite the Creeks to resist the whites who were slowly encroaching on their land. This caused the Creeks to divide into two factions, those who wanted to assimilate with the whites and those who wanted to rebel, aka the Red Sticks. Jackson took advantage of this dissent between the two Creek factions, recruiting those who were willing to integrate into the white culture to fight for him. After his victory in the Creek War, Jackson betrayed his allies and demanded the surrender of their land along with the land of the Red Sticks, once again showing his antipathy towards the native tribes. At the same time, Jackson's views of the natives had also been shifted. He now sees the natives as almost victims. Thus, once Jackson becomes president, he attempts to introduce the Indian Removal Act not only to acquire the natives' lands, but also to protect the natives from what he calls the destruction to which they are rapidly hastening while they remained in the States.
Jackson's Indian Removal Act was signed on May 28, 1830. The new set of policies called for a removal of Native Americans currently living in the South and allowed for white settlement on their previous homes. In exchange, the Native Americans would be relocated and granted land west of the Mississippi. Jackson believed that the migration should be voluntary, for it would be as cruel as unjust to compel the Aborigines to abandon the graves to their fathers and seek a home in a distant land. However, according to Jackson, should the natives refuse to relocate, they would be stripped of the title to their lands as well as the right to govern themselves. They would be subjected to the laws of the states, many of which refused to grant equal rights to Native Americans. This included the right to testify against whites in court, meaning the natives would have almost no protection against the whites. The proposal was very controversial, sparking debates over constitutionality, hypocrisy, and the violation of natural rights. Jackson, however, perceived the act as a sympathetic gesture. He did believe that, as he put it, the savages had no right to the land wanted by higher civilizations, but he also believed that the natives would be moving to the west for their own protection. From Jackson's viewpoint, the natives were suffering from both physical and cultural threats. The Southerners desperately wanted the land and would eventually turn violent against the natives, and if the natives remained, in Jackson's words, surrounded by the whites with their arts of civilization, which by destroying the resources of the savage doom him to weakness and decay, then that this fate surely awaits them if they remain within the limits of the states, does not admit a doubt. What meant to be an act to preserve the Native Americans, however, had the complete opposite effect, leading to the terrible tragedy of the Trail of Tears. Jackson would never regret signing the act, and instead proudly championed it as the crowning jewel of his presidency. In his farewell address, Jackson once again showed his true animosity towards the natives that once resided in the southern states, claiming that the states which had so long been retarded in their improvement by the Indian tribes residing in the midst of them are at length relieved from the evil.
Jackson's intentions were to make the natives' living conditions safer, which he only brought more devastation and chaos to the lives of the natives. Jackson played a key role in the Indian Removal Act, and it served to be crucial for the history of our country, mainly its expansion and growth. Due to the loss of the close family at hands of the war, Jackson used this anger to fuel himself and direct it all towards the natives. In the long run, Jackson's stance on Native Americans and their lack of potential for a functioning future of civility proved to be one of the defining stances of his career. The Creek War resulted in more damages and caused another split division amongst the natives. Ultimately, this led to Jackson's agreement of the Indian Removal Act in 1830, which called for all people to relocate their living situation to the west of the Mississippi. If they were not to comply with the terms of the act, they were to be stripped of their rights and simultaneously also lose any legal protection they already had against the whites.